Lord, thank you for the victory that is yours, but that you share with us. Jesus, you earned the victory. You completed the race that was laid out before you. And yet you didn't just keep that prize for yourself, because we are your prize. And so you shared that victory with us. So we praise you because of who you are, and we thank you for what you've done. And tonight we celebrate that you didn't just start, but you finished. And so, God, we thank you for that. We praise you and we worship you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. You may be seated. Welcome to Good Friday service. It's so good to see every single one of you here. And for any of you that are new around here, I am Pastor Patrick. I'm the student ministries pastor here. And if you want to know who our lead pastor is, that's that guy sitting right down in front. That's Pastor Lance. And he will be preaching 2 services on Easter Sunday morning. So if you're like, hey, this guy tonight, he's okay, but Sunday morning will be fantastic. All right, so just know he'll be here for 2 services Sunday morning, but tonight I get to have the privilege of sharing with you for our Good Friday service, and it's so good to be here, and it's good to see every single one of you here this evening. So I've shared before, for those who've been around here a while, is that I was a runner for a long time, which I know for some of you look at me right now and that's a shock, but I tore my meniscus up, and it kept me from being able to run for about 2 years. In that 2 years' time, I put on like 25 pounds. It was amazing what you can do when you eat like you still run 10 miles, but you don't run 10 miles. But I did have surgery this last fall, and so I'm starting to feel a little bit better. And conveniently enough, 2 years ago was about the time that Anderson, my oldest, started thinking he was faster than me when we were running. He was running on the cross-country team, and all of a sudden, I just couldn't run anymore. I don't know what happened, but we ran a 5K together, and somehow he finished in front of me, and I started limping. I don't know what happened. I'm sure he wouldn't have been faster than me if I hadn't been injured. But we'll never know now, will we? Because he's graduating, and that's the end of his running career. So, what can you do? Conveniently enough, though, I had the surgery, and now, this morning, I was able to jog 3 miles, not run, but jog 3 miles on the treadmill. So that's encouraging, because Ainsley wants to start running cross country. She's thinking this next fall going into 6th grade. And though I cannot keep up with a senior in high school running cross country, I figure I can keep up with a 6th grade little girl. So I might not beat her, but I can keep up with her. And so conveniently enough, now my knee is starting to get better again. And it'll probably go about the time she's a sophomore in high school as well. But for at least this fall, we're looking forward to doing that. Now I've run a lot of races. I've run a lot of distances, and there's a place that I've run out in North Dakota, Medora, North Dakota. Who's ever been to Medora, North Dakota? Raise your hand if you've been out there. Okay, that is in the Badlands of North Dakota. They have the Medora musical there. Theodore Roosevelt National Park is based out of Medora, North Dakota, and it's beautiful. And I ran a 10K in Medora, and I've done some mud runs over in Medora, and it's pretty impressive. But they have what they call the Mendenhall Ultra Trail Run. Now, I have never done the Mendenhall Ultra Trail Run. There was a time when I dreamed of doing the Mendenhall Ultra Trail Run. Some people would call that a nightmare. For me, it was a dream. They have different lengths that you can run, but the longest length is over 100 miles long. And you can see what it looks like, right? That is the Mendenhall Trail in the Badlands of North. Now, people always think, they're like, oh, North Dakota and eastern Montana, they're boring and they're this and they're that. That's what it looks like out there. And so that's what they run in. The Badlands are incredible. They're beautiful, and they are rugged. Now, I love the mountains. I'm a mountain person, but I also really like the Badlands. But that race, it used to be 106 miles, but they decided that wasn't far enough. Now it's 116. But It used to be 106 miles, and it goes through the North Dakota Badlands. It can take over 30 hours to complete this race. It starts in the dark on Saturday morning and finishes while the sun is setting on Sunday evening. That's how long it takes to run that race. It is insane. Now, they make you sign a waiver. Now, this is the waiver, and you know it's not short. If you're sitting in the back, you may need to borrow Pastor Lance's reading glasses to be able to read that, because it's pretty small print, but there's a lot on there. Now, this is actually a copy of the waiver that I had to do for one of their mud runs that they were doing, but it gives you an idea of what it is they have to sign. This is what the waiver says. It says, running in the North Dakota Badlands is extremely dangerous and entails known and unanticipated risks that could result in physical or emotional injury. I suffered emotional injury when I ran out there. But yeah, physical or emotional injury, death, or damage to myself, to property, or to third parties. On this course of single track, double track, roads, and paths, you might encounter varying and difficult rough terrain, switchbacks, log jumps, hills, sharp turns, washouts, ruts, creeks, rivers, trees, rocks, vehicles, and other dangerous conditions. There is a possibility of falling, being thrown to and fro, not just to and fro, or collisions with other objects on and off the trail. I may encounter and be attacked by dangerous wildlife. I may encounter other environmental dangers, such as falling and rolling rocks, sudden storms, lightning, and flash floods. I might become lost from the marked course in the daylight or in the dark. Due to the remote location of this event, I understand that immediate rescue is not always possible. Changing weather conditions and exposure to the elements can be uncomfortable, you think, and or harmful. And this exposure could cause sunburn, dehydration, hypothermia, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and heat cramps or fatigue. Prolonged exposure to the elements can result in further injury or death. I am ultimately responsible for my own safety. In the event of an accident, rescue and medical treatment may not be immediately available. I specifically acknowledge that decisions made by volunteers, staff, participants, and rescue responders are often made in wilderness, remote, dangerous settings, and are made based on imprecise, momentary, and subjective perceptions that are subject to errors in judgment and cannot and should not be associated with fault at a later point in time. Vehicles will be traveling on rough back roads and busy highways and interstates, so there is risk of vehicle accidents and collisions that could cause damage to my property or result in physical injury to myself. Where do I sign? I'm just wondering where I sign up for this thing. That's the waiver. That's insane, but that's what you face when you run the Mendenhall. That's the kind of stuff that they have to have you sign, because you could face any one of those things. I think the scariest thing is dangerous livestock. You never know when a cow might turn on you. It could happen. It's dangerous out there. Now, that Mendenhall trail run, the Ultra Trail Run, I know of a lady who ran it. I believe it was in 2019, and she actually runs ultra races like that for the military. She does it, I believe it's for the Army, is who she runs for, to promote the Army, because nothing makes people want to join the Army like the opportunity to run 116 miles in all these conditions. Right? Everybody would want to join the Army if they knew that was going on. But the military has recruited her she's in the military, but they recruited her to run these ultra marathons and these trail runs for them to promote the Army. Now, back in 2019, she had just finished running a 100-mile race when the Army realized that the Mendenhall was available, and they called her up and they said, hey, you should run this, we think, for us as well. Now, when the Army says, we think that you should do something, it means you're doing it. You don't get to decide for yourself. Now, the downside of all this was she was actually recovering from an injury. She had just run a 100-mile race, and she had hurt her leg. And so she wanted some downtime to recuperate and to heal. However, the Army said, you'll be fine. Rub some dirt on it. There's plenty along there. Walk it off, right? In fact, we believe a 106-mile walk-off will probably be what the doctor ordered. And so she said, okay, I will go. Now, she went out there, and she started this race. At night, it was freezing cold. Now, we know at our high elevation, it can get chilly at night. Even in the summertime, it might hit 80 degrees in the daytime, but at night, it drops quite a bit. And it can get pretty chilly here in the summertime at night. Well, out there in western North Dakota in the Badlands, it is practically desert. And so at night, it can drop down to in the 30s, and then in the daytime, get well over 100 degrees. It's got massive swings. So as she started this race in the dark, it was really, really cold. And then as the sun came up, it got up to over 100 degrees on Saturday and on Sunday as she was running this race. So cold night, blazing hot day, recovering from an injury, just ran a 100-mile race. While she was running, she didn't come across livestock. She came across a rattlesnake because rattlesnakes are real out there. And so she came across this rattlesnake. Out here, bears are a thing. Out there, rattlesnakes are a thing. And she said she just decided to run on the opposite side of the trail, the side that the rattlesnake was on. For me, I come across the rattlesnake, I'm thinking maybe I go a different trail altogether, which, by the way, she also did because at some point in the race, she took a wrong turn. And she took the wrong trail, and she had to double back. She had to run through a river, not over a river, not across a river, through a river, because they don't have bridges out there. So she had to run across the Little Missouri River. She had to run the first 50 miles completely alone. For one, there's not a ton of other people that are running, and you spread out over that much time. You spread out quite a long ways. And then they allow you to have a pace runner, but not until after you've completed the first 50 miles. And so she had to run half the race completely by herself. And she says through all of that, she never wanted to quit. She's like, no, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to finish strong. I'm going to do all this stuff. However, then she made a mistake. As she was nearing the end of the race, and she could tell she was nearing the end of the race because suddenly there were spectators along the side of the trail. And as she was nearing the end of the race, she decided to call out to one of the spectators and ask, how much further did she have to go? The person wanting to encourage her cheered her on and said, only 2 more miles. She said at that point, she almost completely broke down. She began to fight tears, and she started to stop, and she wanted to quit. She said inside of her, she cried out, I am never going to finish this race. Now, she had already run 104 miles, but 2 was too many. She's like, I can't finish this thing. I just can't. She managed to pull herself back together again. She goes, no, I can do this. Even if I have to walk, I can do this. And she started to run again, and she did finish the race. In fact, she got second place. And in fact, there weren't 2 miles left. There was only a quarter of a mile left. She was that close to the finish line, 1 lap around a track at the high school, and she almost quit. She says that she believes she probably could have passed the person who got first if she would have just kept running. But because she started to stop, it kept her from getting first place in the race. But she still managed to get second place and completed the race, which to me makes you a winner right there. I know a lot of people are against participation trophies, but if you run 106 miles, you get a participation trophy. I'm sorry, you've earned it, right? You are a winner at that point. Oftentimes, the toughest things that we face get the toughest right before the finish. And that's when the lies begin to speak into your head and into your heart and into your spirit and tell you you can't do it and tell you to quit. And that's what this lady was facing. But we have to make sure that we don't listen to the lies and we don't quit. Now, on Maundy Thursday, which was yesterday, that's when we celebrate and remember the Last Supper, which is where Jesus laid out the example for us of what we now participate in as communion, and we'll be doing that in a little while. And that was his last teaching with his disciples. And then overnight, Thursday night into Good Friday, Jesus went out into the Garden of Gethsemane, and he began to pray. And he went out with the 12, and then he left 9 of them behind. Well, actually 8, because Judas had already left to do what he needed to do. And he brought 3 with him, Peter, James, and John. And he said, you guys, this is hard, guys. I need you to pray for me. Stay awake and pray for me, okay? Oh, yeah, Jesus, we'll do it. And then he went a little farther by himself and began to pray. And we've all heard this probably so many times, but it was so hard. He began to pray, and he began to weep, and he began to cry out to his Father. And then he decided to go back to Peter, John, and James and checked on them, and they were asleep. They were as helpful to him as the spectator crying out only 2 more miles on the sideline. And he woke him up. Couldn't you stay up with me just for an hour? Just for a little while. And ultimately, he decided that their spirits were willing, but their bodies were weak. And they were never able to stay awake with him that night. And he spent that night in anguish, at his weakest moment, so tormented that the sweat began to drop like drops of blood. And I've seen this in someone before. There's an actual thing that takes place where when you are in great distress, the capillaries in your skin, at the surface of your skin, can begin to break, and tiny amounts of blood begins to mix with the sweat. And you really begin to sweat blood. And what did he cry out to his Father? If there is any way, please take this cup away from me. I don't want to do this anymore. And he was that close to quitting right before the finish line. And yet, he didn't waver. He finished that prayer with, but not my will, but your will be done. I will finish the race. I will finish the race. And then he went out and he endured it, because for him, there wasn't a quarter mile left. There was a march up a hill called the Skull. There was a trial, sham trials, beatings, torture, humiliation, the desertion of all those who called themselves his friends, and finally the agony of the cross. And after all that, the ridicule, even from someone else who was hanging on a cross next to him. In John 19, verses 29 through 30, we read, "A jar of wine vinegar was there, so they soaked a sponge in it, but put the sponge on a stalk of the hyssop plant and lifted it to Jesus' lips. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, 'It is finished.' With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit." It's finished. Now, I've never run 106 miles. The longest I've ever run was right around 16 miles. I've run to raise money for Speed the Light, for BGMC, for missions in general. I have run distances of, I've run some 5Ks. I don't like to run that far because I'm not fast enough to run a short distance. I always had to run the longer distance because you watch some of these 5Kers and they sprint the whole thing. That's what they run in high school cross country, and these guys are insane. So I've always been like, no, that's not what I'm doing. Last year, a kid set the record for cross country in Montana from Bozeman, and it was something like 4 minutes and 40-something seconds per mile over 3.1 miles. I'm like, that's insane. So I don't run against those guys. So I didn't like to run anything shorter than a 5K, or than a 10K, which is 6.2 miles. I have run a 5-mile race. The very first race I ever ran was a 5-mile race to raise money for Speed the Light, which is our youth missions. I've done 10K, so 6.2 miles. I've run 10 miles. I've run, one time I ran on a treadmill. I ran a half marathon just to see what it was like. And it was like it's boring on a treadmill. That's what it's like. You need to have multiple movies to watch on your phone to run that far on a treadmill. And I ran 16 miles because I challenged our youth group when we were in Wisconsin to do a bike-a-thon, and they were going to bike 16 miles. And I said, if we raise enough money, I'll run it. And they raised enough money, so I ran it. That was maybe a mistake, but I got all the way through. One of the coolest things that I ever did, as far as an endurance race goes, to raise money, was I did something called the Tough Mudder. And this is a group of us. There was a group of us youth pastors from all around the state of Wisconsin, and we got together to run the Tough Mudder. Now, they do the Spartan race out here. The Tough Mudder makes fun of the Spartan race because they say if you're tough, If you think you're strong, go ahead and do the Spartan. But if you're the toughest person on the planet, do the Tough Mudder. They call the Tough Mudder the toughest race on the planet. That's how they can be. And now they've merged with the Spartan recently. So I don't know who makes fun of who anymore. But that was what we did. And we ran that thing. And it was about 12 miles. You had multiple different obstacles that you had to get over. There were walls. There was things that you had to go under. We had ice water that we had to go through. We had a couple of river crossings. They had spots where they had electrical things hanging down, and you had to there were spots where you had to belly crawl through the mud with electrical things hanging down, and if you hit one, they zapped you. And they had other spots where you had to run through, and they're hanging down, zap, and you get those things. They electrocute you at this race, and people do this for fun. I did it to raise money for missions. People were doing this for fun. I'm like, you guys are insane. However, I wish I could do it again. Now, for signing up, they give you have to show up at race day. That's when they give it to you. But you don't actually have to run the race. All you have to do, there you go. All you have to do is show up after registering, and they give you a T-shirt, which is pretty cool. And I didn't wear it for the race. It's got the Tough Mudder pledge on the back. It says, I understand that Tough Mudder is not a race but a challenge. I put teamwork and camaraderie before my course time. I do not whine, kids whine. I help my fellow mudders complete the course. I overcome all fears. And so this is the shirt that I got for just signing up. You'll notice it's a size medium. There is no way I am wearing this anymore. So here, Anderson, because you don't have to do anything to earn that, so I'll just let you go ahead. You can wear that if you want to. However, I got something else when I crossed the finish line. And what they give you when you cross the finish line, I should have Rocky theme song playing right now. You get a Tough Mudder headband. You cannot purchase these. You don't get them for registering. You don't get them for showing up. The only way that you can get one of these is by completing the Tough Mudder. So if you ever see somebody wearing one of these, it means that they completed the Tough Mudder or beat somebody up who did. So that's what this means. And you have to finish it. It can't be given. It's not bought. It's earned. It's earned when it is finished. Now, Jesus had earned the right to declare, it is finished. He went through it, and he earned something for us and for himself. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 2, the second half of that verse, it says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Now, we should be rejoicing right now because Jesus has done it all and declared that it is finished once and for all time, for us. Jesus paid the price for sin. He endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. So that way we can also be in God's presence. And when he declared it is finished, he was declaring not just the agony and the torment and all of the stuff that he was going through, but the penalty of sin and death that we all had to pay, that we all had to go through, that was finished. It was finished. The separation between us and God was finished. It was done. And we could be together with him for all time. But he also set an example for us. In Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, so on either side of the verse that we were just reading as well as that verse, we are told, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. We need to also follow Jesus' example and keep pressing on and finish what he has called us to do, fixing our eyes on Jesus. We need to remember his example. Now, Jesus did not just wake up one day and decide to go to the cross. In fact, he didn't just wake up on Thursday or on Palm Sunday or a month before. Jesus had spent his entire life training for that moment on the cross. His entire life. And the previous 3 years leading up to that moment, hardcore training to get ready to go to the cross so that he could finish. So that he could finish. When I ran the Tough Mudder, I was running between 7.5 and 10 miles every day so that I could be ready. I was lifting weights. I was swimming. I would swim, go an hour at a time without my feet touching the bottom or my hand touching the wall. Go for an hour, nonstop swimming, so I would be ready. I would take Anderson. Anderson turned 5 that summer. So while he was 4 and 5 years old, I would take him down to the park by our house, and while he was playing, I would just do pull-ups constantly on the monkey bars. So I would be ready to go when it was time for the Tough Mudder. And I trained myself to the point that I was in the best shape of my life. That's what I look like, okay? And I was in my 30s when I looked like that. I'm like, I look good, okay? So, by the way, think across the forehead, they would write your number across your forehead. But that's what I looked like. I was in the best shape of my life. I was 50 pounds less than I weigh right now. That's how good a shape I was in, okay? Now, thank you, Silas. So, if we are going to accomplish something difficult, something hard, something worthwhile, you don't just wake up and do it. I am in the process of trying to lose some of those 50 pounds right now. It takes work. Trying to rehabilitate my knee. It takes work. When I first got back to rehabilitating my knee, what they told me was the one mistake that people try to do is they try to do too much too soon. You start with 10 minutes walking on the treadmill. I used to run 10 miles at a 7-minute per mile pace. And now I can't walk a mile in 10 minutes is where I was at. And then you work your way up to jogging a couple of minutes, walking a couple of minutes, and you work your way up, and you work your way up, and you work your way up. You don't just get up and suddenly you're there. It takes training. Jesus trained his whole life for his time when he was going to the cross. And we follow his example. So how do we train to live out the life that God calls us to live and that Jesus made possible for us to live on the cross? Well, we read our Bibles. We get to know God's word. We spend time in prayer, talking to God, listening to God, communicating with him. We come to church, every one of you. Yay, you did it. Okay, you're in training right now. We come to church. We surround ourselves with other believers who can encourage us and help us. We love other people, and we serve. Well, hold on. Isn't that what we're training for, is so that we can love other people and so that we can serve? Yes, we train by doing. That's how we train. We train by doing. Races involve running, so guess what I do when I'm training for a race? I run. Now I waddle. But I run so that I can train how to race. And Jesus trained his whole life, and we need to be in constant training so that we can live the life that he's called us to live. And sometimes training's hard. Sometimes it's exhausting, and there are mornings I do not want to get up, and there are mornings when I get up and my body says, no, you didn't. And you go, can I keep doing this? I'd rather sit at home and drink a cup of coffee. So we need to stay motivated. Jesus stayed motivated. He said that he did it for the joy set before him. We need to stay motivated. Remember why we are doing what we are doing. The why is extremely important. Most of the time when I am been participating in different races, I'm doing it to raise money, so I think of missionaries. And I think of people that need Jesus. And that will motivate me to keep going when I'm tired and when I'm hurting and when I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Currently, one of my big motivations for why I'm trying to get myself back in shape again is so that I can spend time with my daughter. I want to be able to run with her in the fall. I got to be an assistant coach for Anderson's cross-country team when he was in middle school. I want to be an assistant coach for Ainsley. I want to be able to, when Silas gets old enough, to be able to do things with him. So I think of my kids. That motivates me. Jesus did it for the joy set before him, which was his relationship with us and his relationship with his Father. And that needs to be our motivation for living out our Christ-following life as well. Other people who need to know Jesus. Other people who need to see the love of Jesus poured out to them through us because no one else is going to do it. And our relationship with our Heavenly Father. Now, Jesus finished it. He trained, he kept his motivation in front of him, and he finished it. And he did it for us. We need to follow his example to finish what he has called us to do. And to do that, we've got to train and keep focused, just like Jesus did for his whole life. And we see the results of that as he illustrated what it took to finish with communion. And I want to invite our ushers to come up. We're going to receive communion this evening because I don't know if there is a much better reminder and a much better way to keep our eyes fixed on the author of our faith than what he laid out for us, his body and his blood poured out for us. Now, I do want to give some instructions. They're going to be passing out the elements. Elements is a fancy word for the cracker and the juice. Some churches use wine. We use juice. It's fine. If you're gluten-free, we do have a gluten-free cracker available. Just let the ushers know and they will bring you a gluten-free cracker. Everyone here is welcome to participate. You don't have to be a member of this church. We just ask that you have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And if you don't want to participate, it's fine. Just say no thank you and pass it on. That's fine. No one will look down on you for that. And then we ask, as you take the cracker and you take the cup, that you hold it because we will all take it together. So with that said, I invite our ushers to please pass out the elements for communion this evening.
Have you heard the story of how God so loved the world that he gave to all of us his only Son? Jesus grew into a man, he healed the sick, he loved the lonely, he gave God's love away to everyone. Jesus gave it all. The people followed him, they'd never seen that kind of love. He loved them all no matter what they've done. But not everyone was happy. Some of them were jealous, so they made plans to kill God's only Son. Jesus gave it all. And one night while he was praying, some soldiers came to find him. They took him to their rulers who didn't know just what to do. They asked the people gathered just what they should do with him. The crowds crucify him, though he did nothing wrong. Jesus gave it all. And the soldiers tried to break him. The crowds they mocked and scorned. They led him up a hill called Calvary, and they nailed him to a cross. Still he asked God to forgive them. They didn't understand that it was all for you and me. Jesus gave it all. Jesus said, "It is finished." Then he took his final breath, and the sky grew black as midnight, and the earth began to shake, and the crowd began to tremble. They shook their heads in wonder, and the soldiers said, "I know that this man was the Son of God." Jesus gave it all. And they took him off the cross. They placed him in a tomb. They rolled a large round stone in the doorway of the cave. Some soldiers, they stood watching, making sure no one could enter. Jesus' friends were sad and hopeless as they all went home that day. Jesus gave it all. On the morning of the third day, his mother Mary came to see him, to make his body ready for the grave where he would lay. But the tomb, it was empty. An angel came to tell her, he's not here, he's risen. See, the stone's been rolled away. Jesus gave it all. Jesus gave it all. Jesus gave it all.
In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 23 through 26, we read, "For I received from the Lord what I also passed on to you. The Lord Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.'" Let's take the bread together. In the same way, after supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me. For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." Let's drink the cup together. I always find verse 26 interesting. "For whenever you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes." Proclaim the Lord's death. We shout out to ourselves, "Jesus finished it for me." But we also need to proclaim it and shout it out to everyone in our lives. Every person that we come into contact with is someone that Jesus finished it for. Our greatest motivation is to proclaim the Lord's death to those around us. That's why we're still here, so that others can know that Jesus finished it for them. We need to recognize what he has finished for us. We need to share what he's finished with everyone else. And to do that, we need to train and keep going through the finish line. Tonight, we're going to give you a little something that can help you to live out what we're training for. We're having 2 services this Easter Sunday, 8:30 and 10:30. Note the different times. Okay? We usually meet at 10 o'clock. I shouldn't even say that number right now because I don't want that number in your head. 8:30 and 10:30 this Sunday, we are going to have a service that hopefully impacts the lives of some people that have no idea who Jesus is. Pastor Lance has been preparing his message for this Sunday for a long time. And as a staff, we have been excited in preparing for these services for a long time. And we want it to be such a welcoming place for every person that comes in here, especially those who don't know Jesus. Those that maybe only darken the doors of a church on Christmas and on Easter. Those who come because it's tradition, or those who come because someone invited them. We have these postcards. There's some available in the information hub out by the front doors out there on the tables and out there. Pick one up. Pick 2 up. Pick 10 up. It's not too late to invite someone to come to church this Sunday. Let's run the race and do what Jesus calls to do. And this is an easy way to do it. Our teenagers, our youth group, a week and a half ago, handed these out to every door between here and Durston and the other side of 7th. They went to every door. I know that some of you have gone to doors in your apartment complexes and in your neighborhoods, and some of you invited people. Let's keep inviting people. Here's an easy tool. And then on Sunday morning, when people come in this door, you look for someone that you don't know. And you welcome them and you share the love of Jesus with them, maybe with just a smile and a handshake. But let them know that you are glad that they are here. May they feel the love that Jesus has for them coming from us. Because Jesus said, it is finished. And for us, that means it's time to begin. Lord, I thank you for what you did for us on the cross. I thank you that you loved us enough, not just to die on a cross, but to leave heaven, to walk this earth for 33 years, to spend 3 years traveling and preaching, and then to complete it by being abandoned and betrayed and tortured. And you gave up your life for us and declared it is finished so that we can be with you. But we also know that there is joy coming after that death on the cross because you did not stay dead, and we're going to celebrate that on Sunday morning. Help us to live it, and may we finish the race that you've called us to. In Jesus' name.